Hi, my name is Jillian Flexner, and I am the founder and president of Fresh Squeezed Opera. Welcome to the first of our Fresh Squeezed conversations. Before we begin, I wanted to ask for your support in continuing our work and supporting these amazing composers and artists and creating new opera. Please consider giving. Any amount is incredibly helpful. And without further ado, here is Victoria Benson.
Hi, thank you, Jillian. I'm Victoria Benson. I am a singer, director, producer, and I serve as board chair for Fresh Squeezed Opera. I just want to echo Jillian's ask if you could go visit our donate page. Anything you can contribute these days would be great. We do a lot of work to support new artists, including introducing you to these 6 new composers, starting with Kate Soper. By way of introduction, we would like to begin tonight with a clip from Fresh Squeezed Opera's 2018 production of Here Be Sirens, featuring me, Claire Myers-McCormick, and Devaney Smith.
The Muses Elysium.
So that was 2018's production of Here Be Sirens, which was performed at National Sawdust in Brooklyn. And now we'll bring on Kate Soper to talk a little bit about that piece, as well as her new work, The Romance of the Rose, which will be performed in New Jersey, I believe next year. So as soon as we get Kate up here, we'll be able to talk about that. Hey, Kate.
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Victoria. Good, hanging in there. How are you?
Thanks for joining us tonight.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Of course. So we just were able to see a clip from Here Be Sirens, which is really special. We got to work on that together, and I'm so grateful for that experience.
Mm-hmm.
And when we did work together, you talked about how Here Be Sirens included a lot of music that you worked on ever since you started writing. So can you talk a little bit about how you discovered that you were a composer?
Sure. Did I say that? I think, well, there is definitely there's one particular excerpt in Here Be Sirens that is something I wrote in high school, I think. But everything else was, within the year or two of the opera. But yeah, I mean, I think I started being a composer when I was a really little kid. So I don't really remember, but just as soon as I was sitting at a piano, I was kind of making stuff up and then trying to make little crude caveman notation systems, trying to get my parents to play it. And then by the time I was a teenager, I was, writing things down and kind of had a little pile of songs and pieces of various sorts. Then I think in college made some other decision to actually try to be a composer professionally and embark on that journey. But yeah, I think it's always just been a part of me.
That's great. Now, when you first began composing vocal music, it sounds like that was happening from the very beginning for you.
Mm-hmm.
What tools or resources did you find were most valuable for you?
Well, I'm a singer and a reader, so I think those are the things that kind of launched my interest in that. So ever since I was, and a pianist, sort of. So I think ever since I was making music, I was singing at the piano. And ever since I was reading poetry, I was setting it to music while sitting at the piano and singing. So yeah, that's been really helpful. And then just being around a lot of singers. So, being in choir and musicals and all that good stuff, which I continued to do all through grad school, being in kind of the collegium choirs. Just sort of hanging out with singers because I was writing for them or because I was, working with them has been important. But yeah, mostly just I think the fact that I sing has been a pretty helpful resource as a composer who writes for singers.
Doing it yourself.
Yeah.
As we will soon get to see.
Right.
Now, on your website, you say that you like to explore with your music the wonderfully treacherous landscape of the human voice. Talk a little bit about what you think makes it treacherous and what are the hardest lessons you've learned about setting music for voice?
Yeah, that's a good question. What did I mean by that? I think their voice is treacherous in a lot of ways. And it's the fact that it is the portal for communication for us as a species usually means that it just has a lot of rhetorical tasks that can go awry. I mean, obviously we can lie, but other than that, we can manipulatively, twist the truth or use the voice not only to say words that are harmful, but to say them in a way that is, harmful or questionable. And then I think singing adds a other layer of complexity because the language of music itself is something that can be very manipulative and that has questionable access to truth. So it's interesting to me to play with those ideas and then to play with vocalizations that aren't singing and aren't text, but are like, screaming or sobbing or crying. All of these things have so much emotional weight and particular meaning, but they can also be faked. And of course, as singers, we often have to fake emotion in our voices, or as actors, we have to fake emotion in our speech.
It's
so
what you study. Absolutely.
Right. Exactly.
You learn how to manipulate your voice to express certain things or to hide certain things.
Sure.
And even then it can be treacherous and betray
right. And
you.
with people, pleasure. Yeah.
You can
even, you've probably had tears in your eyes when you're singing before, like it works on you too,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I just think all of those continuums of meaning and expressivity and like the animal noises we make versus the very cultivated noises we make just contribute to the sense that the voice can be treacherous because you never know what's going to come out and what it means somehow. Yep.
It's interesting that you use so much of that, I guess what they call it when you're studying is extra vocal, like extraneous vocal technique or extended vocal technique, because I think a lot of singers, when they're studying are afraid to make those gross noises. You're always trying to figure out how to make the most beautiful sound you can. And one of the things that I learned from your music when I was studying it and getting ready to perform Here Be Sirens was the full range of what my voice can do. And it was a real learning experience to be able to explore safely. And, I think singers get so interested in what's on the page and making it beautiful, and learning your music was a wonderful way for me to find freedom from that. and sort of explore what my voice could actually do.
Oh,
So.
great. That's always really good to hear. I mean, I started
It's wonderful.
writing the kind of gross stuff before I started learning how to do the more refined stuff, because I didn't study voice in college or grad school. So it's always, I'm always grateful when real singers who have a real education in the voice are interested in engaging with my music, which has a lot to do with these other sounds, as you say.
Any singers out there, I would highly recommend looking into Kate's music if you want to explore and see, what you can really do. So if we're talking about singers and the voice and setting music for the voice, we're going to go right into opera. So what is about opera specifically that you're drawn to as a medium for your creative impulses?
Well, I think opera just offers all of the things that I'm interested in. So I like to write and kind of tell stories. So, it's interesting for me to make librettos and create characters, like with Here Be Sirens and other things. And then, again, these explorations of the voice. And I do feel like opera has room for all of those expressions, not just the beautiful singing, but also speech and also other utterances. And then drama and theatricality. I love theater and just the sense of extra dimensionality that you get with it. So it's just sort of a place to put everything I'm interested in seeing and being a part of into one genre, I suppose.
Yeah. So in your operatic style, is that something that you think consciously about, or does it vary from project to project?
I don't think it's something I think consciously about, and it varies, but it's just, opera can hold a really big idea. So it's, maybe it's just sort of a repository for a certain way of thinking about things I'm doing or certain kind of subject matter that I'm interested in. And that will be something that will be kind of the germ around which the pearl forms or whatever it is. But yeah, I don't know that I have a style other than just approaching it with some idea of research and then also some idea of just musical exploration.
When you do your research for a piece, is that a process that you really enjoy?
Oh yeah, I love that part. Yes,
You said you were a reader, so I figured that you
probably.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for Sirens, I was just like, cave.
When you're doing your research, is it always very specific, or are you always, I guess what I'm trying to say is, do you get other ideas while you're doing your research other than just the thing that you're working on at the moment?
I mean, for all the big projects I've done that have required research, there's so many tangents that you can go on that are not just tangents about like this other interesting article, but like this whole other area of inquiry. So I definitely finish a project with just tons of spillover of just like, that like week I spent reading like ancient gardening manuals, and I wonder if that will come in handy, or and then sometimes they find their way into other pieces. There was plenty of stuff from Sirens that didn't end up in the piece, but that I learned about through the research that then wound up in other pieces. So it definitely is sort of like every project kind of introduces me to a lot of new material that's not necessarily just about that opera.
And how do you organize those ideas as you're going through? Is there just one big notebook, or?
Oh God, no. There's basically like, probably 25 different Word files of various lengths, and then just notebooks and I don't know, just sort of, I guess, various journals. If they were, it's all on mostly the computer. I have very terrible handwriting, but it would fill a lot of notebooks. But it helps for me to kind of, this is the place where I put wild notes that I had in the middle of the night, and this is the place where I like kind of try to do the plot points.
Plus it helps with keyword searches when you're trying to find it later.
Yes, that's true. Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So your new work is Romance of the Rose.
Mm-hmm.
And that was supposed to premiere this year.
Mm-hmm.
And as many things did this year, it got postponed.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about that piece and, its genesis, and then when it's going to premiere next? Sure.
So it was going to premiere on April 2nd. So we were kind of in the thick of rehearsal when we pulled the plug, and looks like we're going to remount it, I guess, I don't know. It didn't, whatever.
Put it
Put it on in September of this year at Peak Performances, and they've been really great.
Of next year.
No, like
2021.
21.
Okay, got
Yeah.
it.
What is time?
Who knows what time is?
Yeah, right. Whatever September 21 means, that's the current status. With Peak Performances, which has been a great co-producer, and the Wet Ink Ensemble. And what else did you ask me? Like, what is the...
Talk about the genesis of
sure.
Romance of the Rose. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think most of my big projects are things that I've been thinking about for a really long time. So I first read, so The Romance of the Rose is loosely inspired by a medieval epic poem, allegorical poem called Le Roman de la Rose in French. And I read it in my last semester of grad school during a Michaud seminar I was taking at NYU, and just really fell in love with it. I'm interested in medieval literature and medieval art. Sometimes it seems like there's always something hidden about it. I mean, speaking of like the treacherous voice, that the use of allegory, which is so prevalent in medieval literature, just is very operatic in a sense. It's sort of like presenting something that sort of stands in for something else, or some idea of a character or plot or entire story that is, real and exists, but behind it, there's the real truth or the meaning. But anyway, it also is just like crazy and funny and like bawdy and bizarre. So I just knew I wanted to work on it. And then I guess I started in spring 2017, kind of digging in. And that was a long research process because it's such a long book. And unlike something like Here Be Sirens, there isn't like a general cultural understanding of like, oh yeah, the Romance of the Rose. But there are archetypal characters in it that we recognize, like Lady Reason or the God of Love. So it eventually became about uncovering a contemporary story that seemed to resonate with the original, but also with, being alive right now, about how difficult it is to really know someone or yourself, and how do you cope and move forward and fall in love, given how little we can really be certain of. And there's a lot of other things in it too. I managed to put some stuff about my suspicions about music as an art form in the opera. I always kind of like using opera as a way to investigate opera.
I love that you're like a detective about it.
Well,
it's suspicions about opera.
I mean, I
think
can't
that's
help
great.
it, So, and I think eventually I figured that I would just put the unsettling feelings I have about music into the music itself, and that's sort of a good way for me.
I think we're definitely at a time where everybody needs to be a little bit more suspicious about opera and about what it means and the stories that we're telling and how we're telling them. So it seems particularly relevant right now.
And,
and to introduce everybody to a little bit of Romance of the Rose, we have a clip from the prologue performed by Kate Soper.
Some say that dreams are flimsy doublespeak, and that we, once sleep has pulled its heavy blinds, masquerade in fancy and deceit, conjured by our thoughtless, dreaming minds. But may we not protest this condemnation? For dreams contain much more than artful lies. And aside from granting nighttime recreation, may edify, illumine, prophesize. Prophetic visions are the most celebrated subjects of dreams. The most common subjects include being chased or pursued, the feeling of flying, the feeling of falling, and erotic all of which will be relevant for us tonight. Because this is no ordinary dream. This is a love story.
Thank you for sharing that with us, Kate. Great dress, by the way.
Sure.
The gold dress.
Thank you. Oh yeah, we were. So originally, this is performed by the tenor lead, but it's in my vocal range. But and that's Josh Modney, violinist, performing with me. And I told him our costume theme was Star Trek holodeck casino. That just sort of seemed to be the mood. So I'm glad I got to wear that dress.
Nailed it.
To a wedding once, but yeah.
That's great.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the prologue, part of the prologue for Romance of the Rose. And this is something that you said you were in the middle of rehearsals for when it was postponed. And you also were able to do a workshop for that piece as well. Not something that a lot of new composers get the opportunity to do. What were the benefits of the workshop? And do you know if there are any ways that you would recommend composers starting out kind of replicate that experience?
Well, yeah, I mean, I definitely recommend trying to workshop an opera if you possibly can. I think my experience with my sort of two previous operas, Here Be Sirens and Ipsa Dixit, there was a lot of built-in workshopping time because they were for such small forces. So in Here Be Sirens, I was one of the original singers and it was just three of us. So we spent a lot of time together rehearsing, but since we were the full complement of the ensemble, it did end up feeling workshoppy because we did develop our characters and develop pacings of stuff. And with Ipsa Dixit, that is a piece for voice and three instruments. And it was similar, a lot of just time together, putting it together. This is the Romance of the Rose is much larger work for 8 instruments and 7 singers, and it's much longer. So I'm really, really grateful that we had a lot of different kinds of workshops. Actually, there was the first workshop we had was a workshop just to read the libretto with some actors in 2017. And it was like completely not what I wanted. And I hated the libretto. So then I had a chance to rewrite the whole thing. And then we had another workshop, I think summer 2018, maybe, with this new version. And it was, coming together, but still not quite there. And then we had another workshop. I don't even remember, maybe the next summer. It just, even in this time in which we were ostensibly rehearsing the finished piece to perform it, the day that we quit, we were rehearsing the scene at the beginning of Act 2 that wasn't like quite getting where it needed to go. And I've since made a little nudge to it. So now I feel like, yes, now it's done. But yeah, the workshopping was really, really important and really shaped the piece. And it was just so good to get feedback from the director, Michael Rao, and my dramaturg, Annie Holt, and all of the cast and players and crew, and even people who were in workshop versions who are not cast in the final opera, but just getting feedback from everyone about what was making sense to them and what was working and what wasn't working. I really couldn't. I think it is the strongest version of itself now, but it just definitely would not have been if I had not had all those workshopping opportunities.
Yeah.
So whatever you can do, I think if it's a small opera, then you can, get your friends to just kind of read it through with you. And if it's larger, then, I think there's grants you can apply for. I got a grant from the Discovery.
The Opera America Discovery.
Yeah.
Grant.
And then I had some support from my teaching job and other things. But yeah, whatever you can do to kind of not just hear the music, but I think for me, I hadn't realized how important it is to see it on stage. In our last workshop, which was, I guess, summer 2019, I thought it was really done. But then seeing people walk around and singing, you sort of realize oh, that actually that's too short and they need to be talking to each other. So yeah, just whatever you can do to kind of see it stumble around on its feet, I think would be really useful. I think that's my advice to opera composers.
Do you ever consider any of your work finished, complete?
I think so, just because I can't imagine going back to it. I mean, maybe there's a couple things I would tweak in Here Be Sirens, but not enough to say that it needs a revision, and ipse dixit, same thing. So I'm sure there will be some small changes with Rose just once we go through the rehearsal process again. But yeah, I think after 3 years, it feels pretty complete to me.
You have, it sounds like, a bunch of other ideas that need your attention anyway, so got to move on to other things.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go ahead and take a look at the second clip from Romance of the Rose.
Greetings. I am Lady Reason. And you are a fool to succumb to the pangs of love, that weakness which preys on degraded minds. Fear not. I have come to instruct you on how to renounce this rose for good. Now tell me, do the wounds in your breast not smart? Well, then, do you not wish to be cured of your affliction? You don't know? How is it possible you should hesitate to choose between anguished tumult and good sense? You heard some music? Some beautiful, sad music? There is no such thing as sad music. Music cannot be sad, or frightened, or happy, or confused. It cannot indicate some state that it feels. It is not sentient. Music and love. Twin sicknesses which hijack the emotion and override the mind. And yet, there do exist virtuous alternatives to the depravity which oppresses you.
Ah, that was wonderful. Thanks so much for sharing that. You were giving me major Ruth Bader Ginsburg vibes in that one.
Oh, I'll take that.
I really liked it. That was great. Now, tell us about what your artistic process has been like during quarantine. We've all been struggling with that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, well, I made both of those videos in quarantine. So Brett Umlauf will play Lady Reason in the premiere. But so I think at the beginning it was some feeling of wanting to continue the momentum from the opera, and I have some other clips in various places. And yeah, I kind of then started getting into making videos, and I made a kind of series of videos called Unwritten Operas that was all based on books that I kind of had always wanted to set somehow. And then I made a short 5-part series called Syrinx about a woman who has like a vocoder voice disease, and a couple of like weird quarantine skits. So I'm sort of exploring that as a new medium, just to try to figure out how to be an artist in this virtual world and amidst all this anxiety. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's
you've been working and you've been making things.
I've been making things. I think it's sort of just makes me it's what I like to do. So yeah. But
well, everybody can take a look at Kate's Unwritten Operas on your YouTube page, I believe. We'll put the link to that in our show notes. And we do have an audience question. Let me just pull it up really quickly. Since you do come from writing for voice and being a singer yourself, what do you do when you're writing for instruments for the vocal work, and how do you balance those out with the voice?
Yeah, well, I think like you saw in that clip from the prologue of the opera, it's important to me that there really is a balance, and that it's not, I don't often have a strong sense of a vocal soloist and everyone just kind of accompanying that person. So I think instruments can also have a lot of this kind of rhetorical and even like vocal or emotional weight. So I try to think about them as being characterful, and in my staged works, try to bring them literally on stage and in view as much as I can. So the Romance of the Rose opera, the instruments are very specifically tied to particular characters, and they have a lot of intimate interaction kind of musically. And then, yeah, I mean, I love writing for instruments. In some ways, it's easier to be a little more experimental with instruments than with the voice, especially with the freelancers that I work with, who are all beasts and amazing players. But yeah, so I just sort of, try to keep them in the action and then just sort of use them to explore new timbres as well.
That's great. Well, we've come to the end of our chat today. Kate, would you like to tell everybody where they can find your work? What's coming up next for you?
Sure. So I have a YouTube channel that I guess is just, I don't know what the URL is, but it's just Kate Soper's YouTube. And I have a website where I sometimes post updates, katesoper.com. And then,
when is Romance of the Rose? You said
Romance
September.
of the Rose will be September 2021.
And where is that going to be?
That will be at Peak Performances in Montclair State University, and it will likely be very live streamed, as is our way now. So even if you can't get there, you can probably see it. I think the last weekend of September is when we're hoping.
And for those of you in New York, there is a bus that will take you right there.
Yes, it's very easy. I did it 1,000 times last year.
You can buy it like with the ticket, I think. When
I think so. They make it very easy.
Yeah,
you won't even
feel
it. New Jersey Transit is great. And then I'll have a short fiction piece coming out in McSweeney's that has an audio component, and we'll maybe be doing other kind of like multimedia things. But yeah.
That's great. Thank you again so much. It's been really nice to chat with you.
Yeah, nice chatting with you too.
And good luck with all the projects that you've got going on.
Thank you.
All right. Take care. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Bye.